So yesterday was Memorial Day, and I was invited over to my best friend's house for some barbecue. He spent, I think, 16 or 18 hours smoking some baby back ribs. I think he did 8 full racks of ribs, and he was having a party for his whole cul-de-sac. It was a great party. And while I was there, my wife was talking to one of his neighbors and mentioned the fact that I dabbled in blacksmithing. He asked to see a key fob that I had made, and he seemed to be impressed by it, and looks up at me with a smile and says, "Hey, you want a vise?" And I said, "Well, what are we talking about?" And he tells me that he's got this vise that's missing its jaws in his garden, just sitting there. It's rusted solid, and he can't do anything with it, and figured that anybody that does blacksmithing might be able to actually fix it, maybe even get some use out of it. So I said, sure, let's go take a look. And here this was, just sitting in the ground in his garden. It's a Prentiss Bulldog vise, model 59. Now if you take a close look at the jaws here, you'll see how tall and narrow they are. That has to do with the desire to cut at a sharper angle, or file at a sharper angle. It's your approach to the material that you're working on. And this is called a Coachmaker's vise. It's also called a pattern maker's vise. It's used also by woodworkers. Anyways, the company no longer exists, and they had their first patent in the 1860s, and this particular model vise was sold, I think, between 1880 and 1940, when the company was bought out by a competitor. Anyway, so first thing we're going to do is soak it in a vinegar bath to kind of loosen it up, and we'll have to tap out the bolts that have sheared off. The face, the faces on the jaws have gone. But anyways, long story short, should be a pretty fun project. Let's get to it. So I've got the vise in a suitable container. Now I'm going to just add in a whole bunch of white vinegar, and we'll let this soak for a couple days or more. So I've got the vise fully submerged. I've made use of some plastic containers filled with water, well, except for the antifreeze. Those are full of antifreeze still. But anyways, so the other 5 plastic containers are just filled with water so that they displace some of the vinegar, allowing the vinegar level to rise high enough to fully cover that vise. Now I just cover it up, and we let it sit for a couple days, maybe more, and that'll help eliminate the rust and the frozen, the fact that the thread is frozen inside. So it should help loosen it up. And once this is done, we'll neutralize the acid and start working with some penetrating oils, either WD-40 or 3-in-1 oil, to help loosen things up. Then it'll be time to use a wire brush, tap out those, or use an easy out and get rid of those sheared off bolts on the jaws. Yeah, then we'll clean it up some more, paint it, get some jaw inserts on it, and we should be good to go. Okay, so this is 24 hours later. The vise has been soaking in vinegar. The container has been sometimes in sunlight, sometimes in shade. If you look close, you can actually see bubbles percolating up, and there's kind of a current running through it. You can see the silt moving around. So it's definitely working. It's working on that grime and rust, dissolving it away. We're going to give it at least another 24 hours, and then we'll take a closer look at it. I guess I need to buy some rubber gloves first. Anyways, we'll check in on it again tomorrow. So we're now at the 48-hour mark. Water is more murky than yesterday. You can still see bubbles forming, and this thing is still actively working. So today's Thursday. I've decided that I'm probably going to just leave this to soak until Saturday morning. It's not like it's going to harm the metal at all. Anyways, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I did the same kind of vinegar soak on a Peter Wright anvil. It turned out really well. That only had 48 hours of soak, but scrubbing it afterwards was quite laborious. So I'm hoping maybe if I let this go till Saturday, it'll clean up that much easier. Anyways, we'll check this again tomorrow, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, I think Saturday's the day we're gonna take these displacement bottles out to lower the level of vinegar, and then we'll take a wire brush to it and start cleaning it up. Alrighty, we're a little over 72 hours now, probably 74 actually. It is Friday evening. I'm going to let this go at least another 12 hours, maybe more. So I'll be dealing with this Saturday morning. That'll be 86 hours. Well, it'll probably be more like 90 by the time I actually get to it. But anyways, we're getting down to the wire. You can see oily sheens on the top, well, the lower right-hand corner of the image. A lot of pus, for lack of a better description, floating on the top. Still bubbling, still working. Pretty cool. Anyways, we'll check this again tomorrow morning. So it's been about 90 hours now. I'm going to move this box, this crate, out into the yard, lay out a tarp, and then start cleaning things up. So I just noticed that the battery died while I was brushing, cleaning this. Guess I'll have to start powering the camera directly so it doesn't run out of juice. So I've gotten the Prentiss Vise cleaned up with a vinegar bath, scrubbed it down, then I've protected it with a couple coats of boiled linseed oil, and now it's time to work on the base. I'm not just going to bolt this to my workbench, I'm going to bolt it to a 1/2-inch thick steel plate that you see there on the left, and on the bottom of that plate is going to be welded a 2-inch by 2-inch square tube that'll fit the vise receivers that I have on my workbench. Now you'll notice that the vise is fully closed at the moment, and there's a gap here. You'll notice that the removable jaws or jaw faces have sheared off, so I'll be taking the vise over to a friend of mine to help me remove these broken screws, and then I'll get new jaw faces for them. Well, I'll probably have to make them. But for now, we're going to make a template of the bottom here so that I know where to mark and drill and cut. The corner here is going to be cut. If you look at you've got this stop that butts up against your bench, so when you're banging on things, the vise doesn't move too much. So I'm going to be cutting a corner of this off, mounting it there, and kind of diagonally, and then it'll be bolted to this plate. Anyways, to mark this correctly, I have to take it apart. So I'll go ahead and unscrew this the rest of the way. So right after I received this vise, I went online to try to find out more about it, determine its age, that sort of thing. And I also asked if anybody in the vise community could tell me where I could find replacement vise jaw inserts. This vise is currently closed all the way, and there's a 3/8 inch gap here, so obviously it had some vise jaw inserts bolted to it. And this is also evident by the fact that the bolts that held these faces in place are sheared off. I'm not sure if you can see that. Yeah, so you can see where there were bolts. Anyways, it's pretty obvious that there were vise jaw inserts bolted to the faces. This company, Prentis, actually held the patent for removable jaw faces. It's something that they advertised. Anyways, it seems to me that since those jaws, those bolts have sheared off, those faces were probably simply surface mounted with no support other than those bolts. Most jaw vices with removable jaw faces, they'll have some form of ledge or slot that the faces rest on, so that hammering doesn't provide any undue stress. Now, this being a Coachmaker's vise, it's possible that they didn't expect anybody to really beat on it like a mechanic's vise or a blacksmith's vise. Be that as it may, I'm going to, with the aid of a friend, I'm going to manufacture replacement jaw faces. But what we're going to do is we're going to plane down this top ledge here just enough to make a flat, smooth surface. And then I'm going to use this bar stock. It's 1 inch thick by 2.5 inches wide, and it's 12 inches long. And we will machine in such a way, we'll machine in about maybe 3/8 of an inch, or maybe a quarter, and provide a ledge along the top, so that if any force of blows from a hammer strike this, it'll be absorbed by the actual vise jaws themselves. So we're going to be cutting down this bar. This vise is, I think, 4¼ inches wide. Yeah, 4¼ inches. I'm thinking that I'm going to cut this bar down into two 5-inch sections, so that it'll be easier to manipulate. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to cut this down. Perfection. So my buddy Tom here is going to help me extract these sheared off bolts that we're holding the jaw faces on. This should be fun. So what he's doing is using a TIG welder to add a little mass to the end of the sheared off bolt, and it'll be a slow process to avoid welding the bolt onto the jaw itself. And the goal is to produce enough of a protrusion that we can grab onto it with a pair of pliers or something and see if we can extract the bolt by hand. Woohoo! Still hot? Let's see if we can. I don't know if we can focus on that. Guess not. How are you using here? So good. Yep, you got it. That's so sweet. All right. Sweet. Sweet. You are a god.
I mean, you know, this is just like you work. This is easy.
Very.
Theoretically, no. Wipe that off and see how it fits.
Awesome.
It's like it's boats and airplanes. It's not a winning financially, it's not a winning deal. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so what's the plan, Stan?
I think it's time for dinner. And then we can think about this. So, what year do you think this Vise was made?
So this particular model was first sold in the late 1860s, so like 1868. And because of the font that's in use, I can tell that it predates 1920 because they went to a sans serif font. So it's between 1868 and 1920.
Right after the Civil War.
Pretty cool, huh? All right.
Turned out better than I thought.
That's really sweet.
Well, I guess we'll take the Vise over there and work on the balloons.
Yeah, of course. You got a needle, a pin? So it's static and dynamic.
Junkyard paint.
Mm-hmm. I had a pen for the longest time. Dry?
Probably getting
Oh, I guess this isn't the side that needs the blue.
there. Well, I don't. Guess They got the spray on stuff, then you got to worry about the nozzles. I only use that when I gotta use it. This stuff holds up pretty good. I put it on things just as a finish.
All right, so my Prentiss Vise is almost finished. Just got just finished getting these jaw faces milled and mounted. So now need a little bit more cleanup to do. And then I'll be painting it. I'm going to go with a matte finish clear coat Rust-Oleum on all of the non-working surfaces, and I'll probably just rub a little boiled linseed oil on the actual working surfaces. We'll lube up the screw a little bit, and actually, we're probably going to mount it first, at least temporarily, so that I can hold on to it better. I've got this mount that I've made that the vise will be bolted to, and it'll sit into a receiver here on the corner of my workbench. You can't really see it now, and you'll see it here in a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted to this plate, and then it'll be a little more stable while I clean it up. So I'm mounting this only temporarily for while I'm cleaning up these stains from the bluing. I'll take the jaw faces off and clean the insides of them. I'm going to be taking a flap disc around all of these sharp edges to make those nice and safe. They're kind of sharp. These have been freshly milled. If you take a close look here, you'll see how the jaw is indented a quarter of an inch to overhang over the original jaw arm, for lack of the correct terminology. These the jaw faces I've got probably thicker than I needed them to be, but the metal was cheap. So this is mild steel. A lot of times the jaw faces are hardened. I guess I can still case harden this if I wanted to, but I don't know if I really have the need. And I made them wider because I wanted a good 5 inches. It's a little proud of 5 inches, maybe 5 and 1/16 or, oh, let's measure it. Yeah, 5 and 1/16. When I first cut this this metal, I cut it at 5 1/8, so I had enough that I could get these sides milled down and still have at least 5 inches. I also had the tops of these jaws milled flat so that these would sit on them correctly. Which reminds me, when I bought the Allen screw, the Allen bolts, I mistakenly picked up one that was metric. Guess I should find the Allen wrench for this. And the vise mount hasn't been shimmed or adjusted yet, so it's going to remain a little bit loose until I do that. Again, I'm going to be taking this all apart again to clean it and paint it. This is just to play with it. So if you watched part of the other video, you'll notice I've got an S and a D. That's for static, dynamic. This is the one that moves, so it's dynamic. And the manufacturing processes were not so exact that these would be interchangeable. So they are the drill holes. They are unique for its specific side. So I'm going to be marking these probably on the inside as well as the bottom as far as which part of the vise it connects to. Now when the jaw is fully closed, there is a 32nd, a little more, not quite a 16th, but there's a bit of a gap here at the top edge when the vise is closed. You see it's real tight down here. So what this means is that these jaw faces are not exactly square to the, well, we use this as the reference point, with the vise being bolted down to the table of the mill. And anyways, I don't know if I'm going to correct this or not. I don't know if it matters enough to me. In order to correct this, I probably have to shave a 1/16 of an inch or less diagonally from this corner to the inside corner here. So going in a 1/16 of an inch. That's a pretty fine adjustment for something that's, I keep repeating this mantra over and over. It's just a bench vise. It's just a bench vise. Anyways, you know, there's a lot of slop in it anyway. So one thing that I want to do is figure out exactly how far these jaws will open safely. Okay, so that's about as far as you ever want to open it, so that the screw is fully contained in the nut, or I guess they'd call it a nut. Okay, so with these extra thick jaw faces, I'm expecting about 7 to 8 inches. Okay, so it is exactly 8 inches opening. That's pretty sweet. I like it. Alrighty, well that's it for this weekend. I'm going to just leave this be, and I will do the cleaning up, the softening of these edges, chamfer, rounding, whatever you want to call it. Then we'll get it degreased and painted. Man, this is a nice vise. I'm super happy. So I've stamped the words static and dynamic to the bottom halves of the jaw faces. The static one stays on the static side of the vise, while the dynamic one will bolt to the jaw that moves in and out. The reason for this is because the bolt holes are unique. They are not interchangeable, so they have to stay on the sides that they were designed for. I neglected to film the fact that I degreased and painted the vise. It's been painted with matte finish clear coat Rust-Oleum, and the degreaser I used is carburetor cleaner. Works really well, by the way. Okay, so now the plan is to use the flap disc and smooth down and put a softer edge, get rid of these hard, sharp edges. So we're going to do that now. All right, well, it's finished, at least as finished as I'm going to make it. I have the jaw faces, the edges of the jaw faces smoothed down so there's no sharp edges. It's been degreased, it's been painted with a matte finish clear coat Rust-Oleum, and it's mounted to the stand, well, to the vise mount, which is removable. I can, well, of course, if I could lift this thing with one arm. Anyways, it's easily removable and interchangeable through this system here. More on that later. Anyways, got to get this video finished and posted. Hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a long one. Many thanks to those who stuck it through and watched the whole thing. Take care. Bye.